just the biggest lesson that I learned, back yourself 100%. If it's important enough, you'll find a way. And if you don't try, you'll be disappointed in yourself. And if the backing yourself isn't a lesson that you've learned in a really hard, brutal way like I did, you can teach yourself in a more gentle way just by planning your day to come with one most important action every single day, taking that action, teaching yourself that you're the type of person who comes through for you. It doesn't even matter how small that action is. Those reference points for success will build up, and bit by bit, gradually, rather than some big overnight epiphany maybe like I had, bit by bit, you'll become that person that backs yourself. And that's probably the most important gift you can give yourself.
Unlost Cause is a community that shares stories of individuals 40 and beyond who found the courage to reclaim their dreams and live without regrets. I'm David New, and I hope these stories help you find joy, purpose, and passion in a life true to you. Kate Galli was living the dream, or so it seemed. A thriving career in Sydney's fitness scene, loyal clients, and a solid income. But beneath the surface, something didn't align, so she walked away to build a heart-led business that reflects her values, voice, and vegan vision. Today, she joins us to share how trusting herself through grief, burnout, and reinvention turned her long-held lost cause into a mission-driven unlost cause movement. Kate, welcome to Unlost Cause.
David, fabulous intro. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, one of the questions I first like to do is just level set with the audience. Can you summarize what your lost cause was that you turned into an unlost cause in maybe 2 or 3 sentences? Because we're going to talk a lot about childhood and things leading up to it, but at least the audience has that backdrop of what you eventually turned into reality.
The lost cause was the online vision, the online business, completely aligned with my values, which are freedom, integrity, and passion. And so it was a combination of making my money, having my impact without any sort of location dependence, doing only things that truly align with my heart, which has ended up being a combination of vegan health coaching, podcasting, and writing books.
Beautiful. So as a child, were you really, I imagine you were growing up in Australia, so I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. Were you influenced by health, and were you also influenced by nutrition?
So I actually grew up in New Zealand, even though I am Australian. No, we moved there when I was very young, like 2 years old. We'd always return to Australia for holidays to see all the family. I was kind of the opposite of how I've turned out now, right? Debilitatingly shy, really bad eyesight. I've still got that, sadly. So I've never been able to drive. It meant I was pretty uncoordinated at sports. And so I was never that fit girl. I was good at running and skiing and horse riding, but really just solo sports, so to speak, and definitely, not gym obsessed early days. And as I said, painfully shy, loved animals, still ate animals as most people do. Early days, I remember, because we'd visit the grandparents in Australia every couple of years, we'd go home to my mum's family's farm. And I wanted to grow up to be not a farmer, a farmer's wife, because I thought my gran had such an amazing life, like with the chickens and the cats and the dogs and craft and flowers and cooking. And so that was the dream early days, David, to be a farmer's wife. And now I'm that vegan health coach, animal rights activist, kind of different.
Wow. And so growing up, you said because of vision and you're very shy, so you weren't super athletic or going into the gym a lot. So growing up, did you have other role models on that health side, like your parents or maybe a sibling or a family friend who was very fit that you would be like, oh, well, that looks intriguing, like maybe something I might want to try?
It's really funny. I remember seeing the girls at school who had the hot bodies, right? The fit ones. And I remember thinking that'd be nice. And it just wasn't me. And then when I was about 18, I first joined the gym. I was living out of home at that point in time. I was working in hospitality. I was partying a lot, living with all my best friends. And I joined the gym because my father said I should, right? He was a pretty gym obsessed at that point in time, probably in his 40s. And I think he saw the gym as an alternative to my late nights out, right? And so I joined. It didn't stick because it wasn't my goal, which is something I very much lead with in health coaching now. It has to be about that hugely compelling why for you. So it didn't stick, funnily, until I met a very fit guy at one of those late nights out. And I thought, let's join the gym again. And this time I wanted to join the gym to transform my own body, to move away from, I guess the scrawny upper body and chunky lower body that I naturally gravitated towards. And what the gym did, it transformed my body. It also transformed my confidence. That was the first big step for me, moving away from that really shy teenager to someone who at least built a fake set of confidence in my late teens and early 20s.
So, okay, we just covered the athletic portion. So I'm curious on the nutrition portion. You loved animals, but you're eating animals. Did anyone inspire you around that age, around I think you said you went vegetarian first before going vegan, but did you have any family friends or relatives or other kind of role models in that world where you're like, oh, that's a weird nutritional, and you kind of just filed that away when you were growing up?
We had a couple of family friends, and exactly as you said, they were just the weird ones. It never resonated with me. I loved meat. I used to declare, up until I turned 16, I used to declare I love meat so much I could never be vegetarian. And then at 16, I had a conversation with a girl at school who explained to me where meat comes from, what needs to happen. And I basically went vegetarian overnight as a result of that. And I will say I didn't do it healthily. My focus was on everything I was cutting out. It wasn't, diverse and abundant like my approach is now. However, I was doing it for the animals, not for my health at all.
Wow. Okay. So at 15, you're like, I could never be a vegetarian. And then you have this conversation. And it's cold turkey almost overnight, it sounds
16, I am all in, very vocal about it, probably starting to find my confidence by now as well. And not the least bit fazed by the fact that no one else I knew, none of my friends were the least bit interested. This was my path. I was all in.
And then last question around the childhood. Did you have any entrepreneurial role models from growing up? Because that's exactly what you're doing now, which is blazing your own path. And usually when I talk to people, they can identify one or two people who were inspiring to them when they were younger.
Not so much entrepreneurial, I guess, like my dad was to a degree. He always had his own business. He was always chasing these huge goals. And to be frank, always losing a lot of money, really. So mum and dad worked very hard. Mum was the stable one. She was a nurse and amazing at that, but not driven by money or fame or prestige, just driven by doing good and being that bright spark of happy in someone's days. So, I probably looked up to what dad was doing way back then. And, fast forward in our conversation, we'll find that I probably certainly grew to really respect more my mother's approach.
Great. And then so when you're graduating from high school, I think a lot of people from Australia, they do an OE or before they go to uni. And sorry if I'm butchering these terms, but I'm just curious, what did you do after high school? Did you go to university or do an OE somewhere?
So this is funny because I finished school in New Zealand. All my best friends were over there. We were living in what we called the cesspit, which was, what the friends called the cesspit. It was a six-bedroom party flat in the middle of the city. I was working in hospitality. I'd done a short design course and decided not to do the 3-year diploma and, just partying. I applied to study fine arts in Sydney, like painting and drawing. And by the time that got accepted, I actually had a boyfriend I was pretty wrapped in. My social life was amazing. I decided I was going to stay in Sydney and do another I decided I was going to stay in Wellington and do another sort of course instead. And I remember again, my father said to me, all right, Dan, will you stay here with your loser friends and your loser boyfriend and your loser job and your loser study? And obviously he wanted me to fly away to the big city, Sydney, and study fine arts over there. And, that's actually what I did. I was the first one of all my friends to leave. I moved to Sydney on my own, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Unbelievable. So, during this time, was this also before or after your dad told you to join the gym?
That was just after. So he's great with the advice. I've never been that receptive to it, really. It's never, he needs to learn to deliver it better, I think. Although you should, when is that ever effective? But he'd said you should join the gym. I did. I stopped. I joined and stayed of my own accord. And I guess in hindsight, I should tell him he was right about the Sydney move, even if he didn't frame it that kindly.
So I'm curious, when you are partying, but you're going to the gym, so you are working out, you're vegetarian, although you said that it wasn't as balanced as you recommend now, were you feeling like you were physically pretty fit because of the dual exercise and the vegetarian diet that you were living by?
You get away with a lot in your 20s, right? Like your body is very forgiving. And, the vegetarian diet improved. I overdosed at the gym. I'd do 2 hours a day my first few years in Sydney, an hour weights, an hour cardio. So it wasn't a sustainable approach. Not what I would advocate now. But again, you're young, you're in your 20s, you're dancing the nights away. I got away with it and I felt pretty fit then. It's certainly not an approach I would advocate now, though.
All right. So then now you're in the big city, Sydney, beautiful city, and you are studying fine arts. So share with the audience, what are the kind of next career milestone and how does that unfold for Kate?
So I guess the dream was to be a famous artist, right? And partway through the degree, I kind of realized, A, that likely wasn't going to happen. And also B, art never brought out the best in me. It was something maybe I had a natural affinity for. However, it brought out the moody teenager in me. It made me very self-absorbed. And, even backtracking back to my final year at school and the art that I did then, it was all about the atrocities we inflict on animals. It wasn't happy art that I was doing at school or at uni. It didn't make me happy. It probably wasn't going to sell, right? And so I'd been doing part-time fundraising for not-for-profits while I was at university, and I'd been working on behalf of many of my favorite NGOs back then, environmental, animal welfare as they were back then. And that lasted a few years until, I kind of realized when I was late 20s, I would say, the one thing that I never got sick of talking about when I was out in Sydney, strangers or friends would always ask me about how I ate and how I trained. And that was the one thing that I never got sick of talking about. And I thought, better late than never. Let's become a personal trainer before you get too old at 30. And at about two, right? Because I always thought I wasn't confident enough to be a personal trainer. Goodness knows where these thoughts come from. However, I made the switch to become a personal trainer in my late 20s.
Given what you talked about a little bit earlier, being a personal trainer, there's this idealism, right? Like that person is buff or cut or ripped and they're super healthy, they're sleeping and taking care of themselves. Is there a lot of imposter syndrome to get into it? Or did you kind of just survey, you're different, you're more wise in your late 20s when you're like, no, actually everyone has a different style and different relatability and there's not one trainer that fits for everyone. So I feel very comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think because I started so late and I'd already been gym obsessed for a long period of time, people had given me the feedback that I already looked the part. I'd have strangers come up and talk to me and ask me about what I did with nutrition and exercise. So I kind of had the confidence by then that I looked the part. I just needed to learn everything else. So that's one area where I haven't felt any imposter syndrome.
Great. And then did you have to take any courses or any classes to transition from art and helping NGOs to then becoming a personal trainer? Or how does someone make that jump?
Of course, there are many ways to study. Mine was a Cert 3 and Cert 4 in fitness. And after qualifying, I will say the most beneficial component of my education was landing my first job at my dream gym in my dream suburb, Bondi Junction, with owner who was very engaged in the business, and he still spent lots of one-on-one time with his trainers. So I learned so much from him and the dream team that, I worked with, so much more than the actual study.
And at that time, when you started being a personal trainer in your late 20s, Kate, was your nutritional vegetarianism, was it starting to adapt to a more broad, what you would just, I think, call healthier refinement of your diet, or was it still the same?
It was the nutritional approach that would get me the body, but it wasn't very balanced or even all of that joyful. So I was adhering to the super high protein, very low carbohydrate approach that was very popular even back then. I was scared of soy. Thank goodness I'm no longer scared of soy. I was scared of carbohydrates, even whole food carbohydrates like potatoes and fruits and lentils. And I ate up to 21 free-range organic egg whites a day and 2 whole eggs every single day, plus heaps of protein powder. So it wasn't balanced at all in hindsight.
Wow. So 21 egg whites a day.
Free range organic, David. I still feel guilty for that.
Wow. And then for that, were you drinking it, or were you actually like making omelets?
Yeah, like you make sweet omelets, you beat it up like a meringue, and then you add protein powder to it, and then you make it into sweet, fluffy omelets. And then I'd always have a huge frittata at dinner time as well with the whole eggs. It's ridiculous.
Oh, great. So then do you remember your first client that you ever had when you transitioned into the gym world, or is it so long ago and it's a distant memory?
I have a haze of early clients. Do you know what I do remember? The only client that ever fired me, because it actually came quite easily and I got clients really fast because I chose to be the most positive focused trainer in the gym. I chose to choose my mood every single day. I think personal training is very visual, not just the way that your body looks, but the attention, your focus within the gym. Everyone else's clients or potential clients are watching as well. So I wanted to be that trainer. And I remember one lady lasted a couple of sessions with me, and we started at 6 a.m. in the morning. And she said to me, "You are just too positive. I can't handle it." And that was the one client that fired me, and it was good for us both.
Yeah, yeah. And are you normally a positive disposition? Is that your kind of normal disposition? Or did you have to say like, hey, I know I have a choice and I'm going to ratchet my positivity up to level 10?
It's been my normal for a few decades now. It wasn't my normal as a child or teenager. And maybe it's because that's when we are moody and self-obsessed, right? However, I came to realize, that was my mantra, choose your mood, when I first became a trainer. And I came to realize that, we can wallow in our self-pity or whatever, or we can just choose to be positive. And they are absolutely the people I want to spend time with. And that's the person I want to be as well.
And do you think that there's a connection between your exercising and the endorphins and the positivity that you're able to have versus maybe when you said you're a teenager, a little bit more moody when you weren't exercising, you didn't have that endorphin or it's that release valve to get that positivity?
There has to be, and it's been proven for our mental health. Exercise is one of the most effective things you can do. And, as I've gotten older, I'm 48 now, I train as much for my mental health and positivity as I do for the aesthetics, right? And it's not just lifting heavy weights in the gym, it's walking in nature. Many years ago, I used to say if I didn't get to walk along the beaches in Sydney once a week, I'd be a moody little whatever. And now I need to walk along the river here in Noosa twice a day now to maintain that positive attitude. And I'm lucky that I can. So it's super important.
I think that is funny because, I'm 51 and I think about, lifting weights is to just maintain healthiness and being able to do simple things with less effort or strain, or, to try to train just to be injury free and, listening to my body versus like pushing through. Like I would tell myself as, when I was younger, like, hey, no pain, no gain, keep going down. I'm like, okay, back off because recovery is so much more, when we get up there in age.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny how the priorities change, right? I will say as well, though, as a health coach, I see rocking around in a fit, strong, healthy body as a powerful way to advocate for the lifestyle, and for me, a powerful way to advocate for the animals.
Mm-hmm. And then so you start doing this at your personal training at your dream gym. You're amazing. You said, I wrote down, you're super positive, the most positive trainer. So then your book of clients just starts growing, I would assume. And was there a certain type of person that was attracted to Kate? Was it going to be men? Was it women at different age groups or different goals that they had for personal training?
Early days, I had such a mix. By the time I left the industry after 18 years, my clients were all older because they stuck with me. Some of my clients had been with me for 18 years and we grew older together, right? So by the time I left, they were either friends my age, they'd become friends, or they were mentors, my mum and dad's age, but early, and always a mix of men and women. Early days, it was from younger than me to much older than me, and just a huge mix. The personal training studio that I worked, we did specialize in fat loss. So I had muscle gain and fitness clients, but fat loss was kind of my specialty, really always has been, and it's probably the most common goal anyway.
Great. So then you're doing personal training for 18 years. And then what were some of the changes that you were going through? Because 18 years doing the same thing, regardless of how soul enriching it is, I'm sure there's also some monotony, some questioning about, maybe the grass is greener on the other side. What is going on for Kate during those 18 years of personal training?
Yeah, that's an amazing understatement. I loved one-on-one personal training for about 2 years. And then I actually made the decision to buy into the franchise that I had been working for. And I was the co-owner of another gym with my first boss, who was that amazing mentor who I had so much respect for, and possibly not the best business partner. And so we bought into that gym franchise, and that was what would become the business from hell.
So what prompted you to go from, loving the day-to-day interaction with your clients and helping them on their primarily fat loss journey to wanting to own a gym and a franchise? Because then your pie chart of time is different, because I'm sure you're managing the business, marketing, finance, accounting versus dealing with the client.
I'll be frank, it was probably many of the things that I'm not so driven by now, right? I was living in a huge, superficial city full of beautiful, wealthy people, and the gyms that I was part of were doing really well at that point in time. The thing, I guess, the career progression for the top trainers in that gym was to buy into the franchise. That was just what you did. I had hesitations because I've always been one to make my own rules and follow my own rules. And a franchise is the opposite of that. A franchise it's all about systems, right? And this guy who started the franchise, his dream was to become the McDonald's of personal training. Now, I mean, that doesn't fill my heart with joy. However, I bought into it probably because I thought this was success. This was financial growth. This was growth in general. And this was just what you did. And, hindsight, we bought the first gym that sold in that entire franchise. It was a very wealthy suburb, very close to the suburb our original gym had been in, a great area. And even though a franchise is all about systems, they didn't yet have the systems in place for when a gym sells. So basically the sale was on a bit of a handshake so far as clients staying and such, and we didn't do our due diligence. And most of the clients that were in that existing franchise left with the two owners that left when they left, and we just bought into a commercial lease, 2 huge gym equipment leases, and a team of trainers that weren't aligned with the visions and values that we held. So it wasn't a great start.
So it wasn't a great start, but did you and your co-founder persevere through it and tell the listeners what that journey was like?
Yeah. So I would have been like very early 30s then, and it was 2008, like global financial crisis time. And my business partner was too smart to stick around, and I was too positively delusional to leave. And so he found himself another business partner to take his half and jump in with me. And I really didn't have a choice at the new business partner unless I wanted to give up as well, which is what I saw it as. And things only got worse from there. This new business partner blazed on in and expected it to be easy because he was amazing. And we both learned that he wasn't amazing, and he gave up pretty early days. And it was basically just me hanging on in there until we were able to eventually sell that gym to someone else after about 2.5 years of money hemorrhaging, zero sleep. Like, it wasn't a fun time, but I got out in the end, and that was amazing.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that the Unlost Cause community, a lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, but I was just talking to someone today is like, being an entrepreneur, because of the stress, or I don't know if the DNA, like the rates of suicide, addiction, depression, and divorce is much higher than the general population. So you being in your early 30s, the GFC, all the stress, were you going through changes, or did you have this rock where I'm just going to keep working out, being positive, or did any bad habits kind of creep in because of the fact that it was so stressful?
So, all I did was work, right? I did get obsessed with, I guess, self-development at that point in time as well. I remember being on the treadmill at the gym, because I'd be at the gym from like 5 a.m. till 8 p.m. or whatever, just to keep the place open the hours it was meant to be open, right? And I'd be listening to my back then Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins audios. And I actually started studying life coaching as well. And some of the lessons in that, I think a lot of people get into coaching to help themselves. And absolutely, it was a huge help for me, just getting through that horrific time when, I'd be taking money off my personal credit card and funneling it into the business account so that I could pay my team of trainers on time before client money came in. And it did always just come in, but thank goodness for that personal credit card. And my team were amazing, and my clients were actually amazing as well. It was just the second business partner and the franchisor, which was really challenging. And I'll tell you a funny story now, that the second business partner decided he wanted to let someone else in on the action as well. He wanted to sell half his share. And he sat me down and proposed this guy who I didn't know very well and certainly didn't like or trust. And I heard him out and I said, look, I'm really not comfortable with this. I don't want your buddy in on this with us. And he said, yeah, fine, no problem. And a couple of weeks later, we were at the gym on a Sunday, and he came in and he tried to get me to sign this. Oh, nothing really, just sign this thing. We just need your signature to me. And I'm like, I'm just going to read it first, okay? And it was me consenting to him selling 50% of his share, which was 25% of our business. And he just tried to slip it on by after I'd already said no. And at that point in time, the franchisor, they called a mediation meeting between us because our relationship was just so fraught. And we all went out to head office, and I turned up, and the way that it was structured, this big office for the franchisor. And on one side of the desk was this intimidating, super successful franchisor, plus she's called the support staff. She's the one that would come around and check the systems and adherence in all the gyms. So the franchisor, the support staff, and my business partner on one side of the desk and me on the other. And that was pretty intimidating. And partway through the conversation, when I'd relayed what had happened with my business partner trying to sneak a change of ownership past me, the franchisor just turned to the other guy and said, oh, mate, that's not so good. And said to me, Kate, build a bridge. And that was that. And as in just get over it, right? Move on. And so that was that franchise. And eventually when we were looking to sell it, I had the most grizzly old business broker. He was amazing, but just imagine a tough old Aussie bloke. And he was hearing many of the dramas in that business that I haven't even shared today. And he said to me, Murray, his name was, he said, Kate, if you ever get out of this business, you need to write a book because this business is a soap opera. And he was absolutely right. And I did get out.
And do you think, like, given the nature of the business and that the co-owner of the franchise with you was a man, that they try to push you over because you were a woman? Or do you think it was just, it was not really gender specific at all?
Do you know, it absolutely had a reputation as a boys' club. I've never been that impacted by that. Often you get asked in podcast conversations about how tough it is to be a woman in business. And maybe I'm lucky that it just doesn't impact me. My mindset is, how effective is that to be impacted by it? I remember when I was going to that mediation at head office, my father called me. He lived in a different state and he said, I'll fly down and come to it with you. And I'm like, heck no chance. I'm fronting up on my own. At that point in time, I didn't know it would be 3 of them on one side of the mediation versus me on the other. And I later heard that another owner was called into a mediation. And bear in mind, at that point in time, I was this tiny 55 kilo, 30-year-old. This other owner competed in heavyweight bodybuilding, well over 100 kilos of solid muscle. He was called into a similar mediation at head office, and he lawyered up and brought his lawyer in for the mediation. So maybe, again, it was delusional optimism or stupidly backing myself. I don't know.
And then was that one of the dominoes that basically started the chain where you said, I can't keep going like this. We need to both sell and get out?
100%. I mean, we both wanted to sell. The point is he just gave up on it and threw it in the too hard basket and decided he was going to lose all the money he invested. And I wasn't open to that, so I was the one that fought for the sale and made the sale come through and handled all the lawyers. The spark, though, I had started studying life coaching and getting obsessed with personal development. And that business, when I was trapped in the gym from hell and feeling zero freedom, and freedom is my number one value, the thought of an online business that was all me and was not tied to any specific location. And that's probably important because franchises have territories and you've got your very strict, tiny little location. And I just wanted freedom.
So you basically did all the fighting, but he got 50% of the proceeds because of your hard work.
He did. And yeah, he did. He wasn't even grateful when I handed over half the sale money to him.
Were you resentful at all, or were you taking the high road?
I knew I'd done the right thing. And, I fought for it. He was going overseas on holiday at the point in time when the sale was potentially going to go through. And, I was just so desperate for this sale to go through. And I said to him, before you go, you should give someone here in Sydney power of attorney so they can sign for you on the dotted line when the sale's about to go through. And I remember he didn't organise it. No power of attorney, just took off on his European holiday. And meanwhile, I'm working my 14-hour days. And then there was a point in time where the lawyer rang me, and it was an afternoon. I remember being in the car park outside the gym, and he said, they're about to walk away. You've got one chance to make this call and make them an offer they can't refuse. And I made the call and they said yes to the offer. And we still needed both of our signatures. And I asked my lawyer what to do. And he didn't tell me to do anything illegal, but he basically said that signature has to be on the paper or it's not going to go through. So his signature managed to get on the paper.
Great. And for the audience, who are thinking about buying a business with a broker or selling a business to get out of it with a broker, it always sounds like this broker is going to make things easy, right? But from my experience in exiting my businesses, the time frame is so long. And when people say, David, aren't you happy? Did you go celebrate at dinner? I'm like, my feeling is relief. Like it's over the finish line and I just want to sleep or, just relax. So I'm just curious, can you share what your experience was like for the audience about how long it took and what were some maybe the major kind of chapters in selling?
Yeah. So I would have decided that I was desperate to sell from probably mid 2010. And it was till February 2011 it sold, and so many dramas along the way, so much financial pressure along the way. I mean, that doesn't sound like hell. It doesn't sound like so long. It felt like so long, and there were so many micro dramas in that period of time. And you nailed it with relief. Relief was just the thank goodness, like freedom, relief. I got out of this, and it's fun. And I had to sign an anti-competition clause as well. And it's funny, walking along the beaches to my new gym in the months after the sale, random people in cafes would say to me, who didn't know me, "Oh my God, you're so happy." And it was just, I just had happiness just like emanating off me because I just escaped this prison and I had my life back. It was amazing.
And I think, if it was mid 2010 to Feb 2011, that's about 8 months. And I think that's like par for the course. And I would say, and share with the listeners, is that part of the reason why it's so challenging is you can't talk to anyone else about it because you can't tell the staff, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling the business," because then they get worried and then they might leave and then the clients might hear it. So all that pressure is on usually a super small subset, like the owners and maybe one layer, someone who's doing the legal or accounting, and you're nodding because it sounds like you had the exact same experience. So all that stress is like, we have to do our day job, but we also have to try to be mum and confidential and move the ball forward on the sale.
100%. I felt like a total fraud. Integrity is my number 2 value, and I felt like I was lying to the people I cared about most. I will say I had a couple of my closest clients who just knew the struggle I was going through and who I shared it with because I trusted them. And my second in command at the gym, my senior trainer, I told him as well because I trusted him, and they all had my back, and that was amazing. However, yeah, just hiding something so big, it costs you a lot.
Definitely. So then you escape out of what you call the prison and share with the community what happens next for Kate, because you've also alluded to you're studying life coaching. And so it sounds like you're going to go through this amazing transformation now.
Yeah, very slow, amazing transformation. However, again, I'm such a rules player. I signed an anti-competition clause for, I think it was a year and whatever number of Ks, whatever it was. In hindsight, I learned that not anyone else that signed that didn't adhere to it. However, I did. I sold the gym. I told all of my clients that I was quitting personal training. I did the right thing. Bit by bit, the vast majority of my clients found their way back to me of their own accord. I didn't contact anyone. They all contacted me. They all said, "We know you've signed this clause. However, this is on us, not you." Bit by bit, I started training again, working out of a friend's gym. And bit by bit, building, just a one-on-one personal training business where I rented from another gym owner. That commercial lease wasn't mine. I never had to worry about a team. Clients just came to me naturally and referred, so I never had to worry about the franchise mandated marketing that wasn't specific to my suburb. And I was studying at the same time. So that was a really pleasant period of years.
Yeah. And then what were you studying specifically?
So life coaching, the NLP was part of it, neuro-linguistic programming. It involved lots of coaching calls where you're coaching clients one-on-one for free and working through a lot of my own limiting beliefs so far as everything I was learning as well, right? As I alluded to early days, a lot of us, we study what we need. Yeah. I never actually anticipated that one-on-one coaching is something that I would want to do as a profession. However, just everything I was learning was so deeply fascinating for me to use in my own life.
And then When you share about the self-limiting beliefs, I think that's a reason why the unlost community or the allure of it is, I think a lot of people develop those from childhood or, from unsupportive partner or parent. Can you share what were some of the self-limiting beliefs that you had to, one, become aware of, and then two, tackle head on?
So, I mean, the big one that the business from hell probably helped me overcome, because that was my insecurity. It's been a pattern throughout my life. First of all, it was with the way I looked and my body looked, and then the gym changed that for me. However, I probably still had an insecurity about being a business owner and backing myself until that gym, where I was surrounded by, let's just say it, super overconfident men who thought they were all that. And then when I got to work really closely with some of them, I saw their faults. I saw how human they were, how they were just stumbling along and lazy and great when the time was good and not great when the time wasn't good. And I learned through selling that business on my own and not letting my team or my clients or my business partner down. That was where I learned to back myself. And that had probably been the biggest limiting belief. Self-talk was one of them that I remember talking through. We all have that negative voice in our head, or we might, and your unconscious mind is listening 24/7 to that voice in your head. So why not reframe it to be a cheerleader, to be supportive? That is something I did, again, every morning, walking along the beach towards the gym, where I do my nice long 90-minute non-rushed workout. I'd be reframing any negative thoughts or reframing any judgmental thoughts towards other people, because judgment is reflected back at you. The more you put out into the world, the more you're going to receive back. Reframing, when something goes wrong, it's the perfect opportunity to reframe it to something that allows you to think the more positive thoughts or take the more beneficial action. So many little things.
So now you're studying life coaching, NLP. Then what becomes the next major stepping stone for Kate?
I am stuck for a lot of years. I'm stuck from 2011 to 2021, a decade, because I'm making great money working with clients who are either friends or mentors, with colleagues I love, and also spending a lot of time doing free online work, whether it's the podcast, which has been around for a decade, or whatever it is online, chasing this dream of this online platform to transition out of one-on-one PT. I'm kind of stuck because I'm doing a lot of both and not focusing on either one. And I'm trapped by the really great money in PT and the fact that it comes easily and I really don't have to think. However, also I'm not challenged. And I'm not growing. And I'm really growing with the online business, but also it's sucking all the money away from the one-on-one personal training that I'm doing. So it's kind of a vicious cycle of just Groundhog Day on the hamster wheel. Like, not awful, but not the life that I was expecting for a full decade.
You know what's unbelievable? You talk about the seen and be seen culture in Sydney, and I lived there for a little bit.
Did
and
you?
Yes, there's some, and I like that Bondi Junction area. So there's a lot of beautiful people. It's very health conscious because of, I think, the sun and the environment. And you're making great money, but you said you're stuck, right? Which is, I think, there's that dichotomy, because you were stuck in this other kind of franchise role and you escaped the prison. And now this other role is getting you stuck in here. And for, you said about a decade till 2021, obviously COVID happens. Was that part of a wake-up call or a transition mentally that you're like, wait a second, I need to do something different now?
Sadly, it's a lot heavier than COVID. What broke me out of that is when my dear mum died suddenly in October 2021. And, to backtrack, we haven't covered that much of this, but mum was my number one person. Maybe early days as a child, I looked up to my father as the entrepreneur. Mum was the nurse and the homemaker and just the loving, generous, warm person. And, a huge conflict in our family was I was vegetarian for 23 years. When I turned vegan 9.5 years ago, that brought up a lot of conflict between my father, who previously owned a meat business, among many things, and myself. And an important part of the story, I guess, is about 7 years ago, my dear mum rang me at Christmas one year. And she said, and I would always fly home from Sydney to Noosa where they lived. And she said, Katie, I don't know what to do about Christmas because you're the vegan animal rights activist and your father's anti-vegan and Christmas is all about the food. Unless you want to mastermind a vegan feast and sell the family on it. I'm like, amazing. I'm going to mastermind this vegan feast. 6 new dishes. It was all delicious. It was a huge success. Mum sat down with me after this amazing Christmas the morning I was flying back to Sydney and she said, Katie, will you watch What the Health with me? Now, I had been emotionally blackmailing my parents to watch What the Health ever since I turned vegan. That didn't work. They didn't watch it. After the Christmas feast, Mum watched it. She said, I'm going to try this plant-based thing for 2 weeks. Fast forward years. Mum's now vegan. Amazing for my relationship with her. We bonded so severely over this. I had so much respect for her because she was still living with the anti-vegan. Not great for their relationship. And so then that takes us to that moment 3.5 years ago where I got the phone call from my father that I always thought I'd get from my mother because Dad's not that healthy in the way that he thinks or eats. And Mum was. She was the most healthy, vibrant person. And I got that phone call from Dad, Kate, it's your mother. And Mum, who I'd spoken to that morning, Sunday morning, walking along the beaches in Sydney like I did every Sunday morning. And she was amazing. By 3 p.m. Sunday, she was gone. And as anyone who's lost the number one person in their life, I mean, it's any way you lose them is horrific. The shock of their 1 hour and gone the next, that just threw me into, I mean, that was the pivot, I guess, that made me realize how short life is. It also made me realize, and we haven't touched on this, but I was a very angry vegan. I wasn't leading with love and compassion like I now do. And I made the decision to be more like my mum, not in that moment, but over the next year of moving through the shock and just, who do I want to be in the world? I want to be more like her.
Ooh, 2 questions. First, when that sudden event happens, does that pull you closer to your father or push you farther away? Because it sounds like your mom was an amazing bridge and, that between you two.
She was the peacekeeper. She hated it when we fought and we would just always go at it like 2 bulls, we're like opposites and we would just go for it. And she hated it. And yes, initially it brought us together because we both lost our number one person. And to make it even worse, this was the 10th of October and 2021 and Australia was in lockdown. And they were in a different state. And so I had to get compassionate leave. Their state had locked their borders to us. And Sydney was about to open its doors out of lockdown the next day. But their state, Queensland, wasn't. And I had to get compassionate leave to get up to Queensland and go into hotel quarantine for a night and be able to say goodbye to her, even though she was on life support before organ donation. And so all of those horrific, surreal, you're this diseased Sydney person coming up into, that was how they treated you, honestly. Like a policeman met you from the taxi when I got back from the hospital from intensive care. And an ambulance drove me there, mind you, because taxis wouldn't drive me. Yeah, taxis wouldn't drive me because I was from Sydney. A policeman met me at the taxi when I got back at like midnight so that he could touch the elevator buttons for me and let me into my hotel room in case I touched anything. It was horrific. And that did force Dad and I closer. It's still a work in progress though. And, my component of that work in progress is not comparing him to Mum because that's unfair.
It sounds like your mom left you this legacy of, instead of being what you called an angry vegan to a compassionate vegan. Was this also part of Kate's transformation? Because I'm as well as like this more softness, or not the should, or, versus like, oh, this is what I do. And you decide for yourself, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Mum always led with deliciousness. Food was the way that she showed love. I know it is for so many people. And the funny thing is, she got so much joy from transforming all the old family favorites when she went vegan. She could veganize anything. And, bit by bit, I was like, this is actually more effective and more fun. When someone feels judged, they're going to get defensive, and it's not good for anyone. And so that was a conscious decision to, yes, be more like her, to honor her. And also because I've learned it's so much more effective in business as well as in relationships.
After this, do you start this transformation where you're going to leave this good money at this gym but you felt stuck in, and that you were going to embody the maximum amount of freedom, which is online, where you can be anywhere, anytime, and produce anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I had my first Christmas home after Mum died at the end of 2021. And obviously that was incredibly hard. However, also I came back to Noosa and all of a sudden it felt like home. I felt closer to her. And I went back to Sydney and I knew that I had one more year in me. I had one more year of personal training to save the money that I would need to save to make the trip. And I had a lockdown cat. I had a cat in my little flat in Sydney, Loki. And I remember saying to him, this was the only way that I got through every January. I was like, Loki, this is our last January in Sydney. February. Loki, this is our last February in Sydney. And it was just 1 month at a time, working really hard. My first book came out at the beginning of that year, and so I was starting to sell. That was dedicated to Mum. She never got to see it, but I got to finish it with the first page dedication to her. And just slowly working through the year, again, feeling like a little bit of a traitor, because all of my friends and none of my clients knew that this was my last year as a trainer.
And why did you decide to keep it so close to the vest? Because you said that to get through it, you told Loki that this is our last January, last February. And part of like saying it out loud, like, hey, everyone, I'm going to go work out, is that kind of accountability. And so it sounds like you have some accountability to Loki, but you didn't want to have it to your clients was it because you're afraid they wouldn't understand and they go find a new trainer? Or what was it about, the accountability to the cat, but not to the humans?
Oh, I thought I'd lose money. I thought they'd stop training I probably didn't think they'd find another trainer while I was still there, but I thought they might be less consistent with their training. And I was trying to save as much money as humanly possible before giving it all up.
And then share with the audience, like, before you decide to go into the virtual or online side, how much like a leap of faith versus like testing did you do? Like, were you waiting to see if the book was going to be successful and that opened up another gate? Like, if this is successful, I earn the right to do this. If that's successful, I earn the right to do that. Or were you like, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to save as much as I can and I'm jumping?
I felt like I had no choice. I was so done. I was so emotionally exhausted after Mum dying. I was grieving. I'd worked so hard anyway, maintaining the personal training, writing the book, the podcast, all of that. I was so near burnt out that I literally knew I was jumping at the end of the year, irrespective. I had fear. I did Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise where you imagine worst case scenario and then what you would do in worst case scenario, and then can you live with that? And worst case scenario was always better than continuing on for another year the way that I was. I was trapped. And that is the one thing I can't handle, feeling trapped.
That's the antithesis of Kate's number one value,
exactly.
Freedom, right?
Yeah.
So then comes December, you tell Loki, this is the last December. And then what happens in the new year where it sounds like you make the jump?
We made the move mid-December. So my clients knew from probably October. And it's really funny because the week that I told my clients, I went on a podcast interview, which to this date was still the most successful one I've ever done. And I sold 70 books in 10 days, and just these book sales from America. And it's quite an expensive book. these sales were just flooding in the same week that I'd told my clients I was leaving, and I'd given notice at the gym that I'd rented space from for a decade at that point in time. And it was like it was all aligned. And I was packing up my flat and I was shipping my stuff to another state, trucking it to another state. And it all just felt completely aligned.
And, we often talk about like things that in our past are a big part of who we are today. And as I can't help but think you had a lot of struggles when you bought into that first gym. But did that prepare you to be a better solo entrepreneur when you moved back home?
Oh, 100%. I do not regret that gym at all because it taught me my most important lessons. Number one, it taught me to back myself 100%. And that is probably the most beneficial belief and habits and mindset that I've ever cultivated. It also taught me what I don't want. I think being super clear on what you don't want as well as what you do want is hugely important. And so 0 regrets with that business. I learned so much from it. And, I actually didn't lose money. I just lost 2.5 years.
Yeah. And then share with the audience. So you move back, you're an author, and then healthification, your podcast, and then you also have the Plant Positive Journal. It sounds like Kate's empire is starting to mushroom. So can you go through these main chapters and how that develops and unfolds?
I still do a lot. I still do too much. However, the thing is they are all completely aligned, both with my heart and with each other. So everything that I do now relates to everything else that I do. The book came first, version 2 is out now. And that came about because, again, my dear mum, a number of years ago, gave me this beautiful gratitude diary for Christmas. And it was this beautiful book full of words and art. And it was a daily planner. And that's how I planned my day to come the night before. And I thought, what if this thing, it's missing one thing. What if all the words in this book helped you adopt a healthy plant-based lifestyle? And it had gratitudes and recipes and art. And so that was how the Plant Positive Journal came about. And that was number one. The podcast had just been chugging along in the background, earning no money. You understand that. And then the main transition financially, because I'd left my one-on-one personal training. And it was funny. I thought I was burnt out from one-on-one work. I thought the dream was just to sell books online, and I worked so hard when I first moved that I gave myself RSI from just being on the computer so much. And actually, I wasn't burnt out from one-on-one. I was burnt out from working with the wrong clients. Now, clients that I loved and respected, however, not clients that were completely value aligned. So now my clients are vegans or people who are plant curious, who want to create a fit, strong, confident body aligned with their hearts. And when they fill in my online intake form and I read their answers, my heart just expands because you're my person, right? They fill it in. I read what they are thinking, what they want to achieve, what they are struggling with. And this is the person I want to work with. And the energy I have for that now, and it's global, it's not restricted by any location. As long as I want to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning, and I do, it's all good. So that is the core component of my business now.
Got it. And when you said that the clients have to be vegan or plant curious, like what would you say is the main benefits of being vegan versus just being on a plant diet and still having dairy and honey and things like that?
I could talk for hours. I'll speak to myself. I'm in it for the animals, right? Once I learnt the unnecessary exploitation and suffering, I was aware of this weight that I had been carrying around for 23 years as a vegetarian for the animals, right? I had been in it for the animals. They were still dying. I wasn't aware of that. Once I was aware of it and I changed my daily actions, just this weight of incongruence, because humans are compassionate, naturally. We all love animals, just some of us, our actions don't align with that yet. So for me, it was the ethics, it was the values, it was the animals. For many people, like my dear mum, early days, it's let's try this plant-based thing for our health, for the huge health benefits. And I get that. I'm going to meet someone where they're at. For weight loss, if you want to eat a huge, abundant, diverse range of food and just never be hungry and never be bored, plants are much lower caloric density generally. So if weight loss is your goal, you can eat these huge meals, still feel satisfied. It was the only diet, not a diet at all, but only diet that my mum could ever stick with because she still got to eat everything she loved, right? Zero restriction, just a few changes. Other people make the change for environmental concerns. I will, as long as your heart is open, I'm going to meet my client where they're at and move at their pace because I've done my days of waving my angry little vegan flag. I've learned that even though that's my heart, it's not effective, right? So I'm a lot more patient than I used to be. I'm just happy to be here and support them.
What's so funny is you're so kind during this chat that I can't even imagine like an angry Kate, like, da-da-da-da. I'm like, what would that even be like?
Ask my father, David. She still rears her ugly head from time to time.
Oh, got it. And with the whole rise of this like GLP-1 class of drugs with Ozempic, do you have clients who do that to say, hey, Kate, I just want to use this to like get like a kickstart and you meet them where they're at? Or are you like, hey, no, that's great, but I'm really about embracing this vegan or plant curious plus all these other benefits of working out with you that really matter?
It's funny, I haven't encountered it with online vegan health coaching. One of my dear clients from my old Sydney days, she'd been with me 18 years and she started these drugs and she was too scared to tell me originally because she knew what I'd think. And I'm not a fan for the Sydney woman that has 5 vanity kilos or more likely even 5 vanity pounds to lose. I'm not a fan of them at all. I think they're there for a reason. They're being misused. That's not the hill I'll die on, though. So I have a strong opinion. However, your choice is your choice. I could say it only impacts the individual. However, then if people who have diabetes aren't getting the medication, it does also impact other individuals. But as I said, I'm so in some of my opinions, specifically relating to a healthy vegan lifestyle, that this hill I don't die on. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it for someone with a few vanity kilos, though.
And, we've been going through all these chapters of Kate's amazing transformation and, you're still young in your 40s. What is is there another couple of phases that you can, tease the audience or the guests with? Or you're like, no, David, I'm going to be centered here for a while because I'm really enjoying it right now?
Oh, no, my goals are huge. My vision is a healthy, compassionate vegan world. My role in that is to be the most effective vegan coach I can be, to help support people, to help welcome people into this world. And that's not just through one-on-one coaching. One of my hard-learned lessons, I've hinted at it. Relationships are the hardest part of any health transformation, particularly a vegan transformation, particularly if your loved ones aren't on board. So creating community is super important to me. That's another huge part of what I do. I have a free online community. I'm looking to build that. I want it to be a safe space for vegans and the plant curious. I think this is something we need to get so much better at, not being the vegan police. We can be perfect in our own lives and have huge high standards for ourselves. However, we have to welcome other people into the lifestyle. And that's what I'm looking to do with my online community. And that's probably where I spend the most of my time these days. I'm split into many pieces still.
I love it. And for the audience, when I was getting ready for this conversation, doing some research, I wrote down 2 quotes that I think were both yours. And I'm going to read them to you. And I want to know your first reaction to it. Never stop making excuses because where would I stop?
Never start making excuses because where would I stop? I love that. Again, that's for myself. I am much kinder with my clients, but lower the bar to raise your chance of success for the clients, right? For myself, that bar is really, really high. I find it easier when I'm not making excuses because they'll build on themselves, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's not only the principal, you got to pay the interest.
100%.
Well, I want to wake up at 5. Okay, you wake up at 5:30, then you might not get this workout. Then you might make not the right decision about what you put in your body later on.
And then you don't go to bed proud. And that is my number one goal every day. I want to go to bed proud of me.
All right, here's the second quote, Kate, is discipline is just choosing between what you want now and what you want most.
I completely agree still. However, that was early days personal training, Kate. That was my first decade, and I was so focused on the discipline. And my hard-learned lesson in recent years is that enjoying the journey is also really important. So you need to have the discipline to help you achieve your goals and work towards your huge vision. However, you also must prioritize the self-care and love and enjoy the journey because none of us know how long we've got.
Yeah. And so you actually did this huge career change and turned this lost cause into an unlost cause. So if you were on your deathbed, Kate, and you didn't take that jump and you were still in Sydney or, for your whole life, working with these clients and, making good money, how do you think you would feel like on that deathbed and not taking that leap?
It's just not even an option. It's kind of the way I always think. I always think that I could not let myself down in this regard. Like, it's not even whether I succeed in my huge vision or not. It's did I try? I can't even imagine not trying. It seems like I gave up on the lost cause for a while. I was still doing everything. I just wasn't all in on the thing that I'm all in now. I never let it go. I always kept fighting. And I would be miserable every day if I knew I wasn't working towards that. And I can't even imagine being on the deathbed and thinking, what if, or I should have. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And are you proud of yourself?
Of course I am. Absolutely. I have changed so much. There are so many ways that I can get better. However, I am also very aware of the ways that I have already changed. And yeah, I'm proud of myself.
And, what's funny is when I ask that question, I get a variety of responses. Some people get very emotional. Some people are like still work in progress. But, my favorite is usually the people who have that self-awareness like yourself to say, yeah, I've taken a step back and I'm taking it in and being present versus like, hey, most entrepreneurs, like they're like, hey, I just want to climb that hill. Then when you get to the top of it, you're like, I want to climb a bigger one. And it just keeps going on this treadmill versus being able to take time and reflect. So I love how clear you were on that answer. And then so for the listeners who are like, I've got a lost cause, but I don't know if I can make it a reality or if I should. Kate can do that because she's like fit, she's toned, she's eating healthy, she's got a lot of things going for her. What would you say to someone who keeps pushing that dream off and not leaning into it?
Just the biggest lesson that I learned, back yourself 100%. If it's important enough, you'll find a way. And if you don't try, you'll be disappointed in yourself. And if the backing yourself isn't a lesson that you've learned in a really hard, brutal way like I did, you can teach yourself in a more gentle way just by planning your day to come with one most important action every single day, taking that action, teaching yourself that you're the type of person who comes through for you. It doesn't even matter how small that action is. Those reference points for success will build up, and bit by bit, gradually, rather than some big overnight epiphany, maybe like I had, bit by bit, you'll become that person that backs yourself. And that's probably the most important gift you can give yourself.
I love it. And Kate, you mentioned that one most important action. But one thing that I heard was that you write and you journal that the night before the next day, right? And what is the benefit of doing that versus doing it at the beginning of the morning with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning?
You don't know how you're going to wake up in the morning, right? And that I plan my days aligned with my goals for the week, aligned with my goals for the month. I wrote a journal. That's my book. I do love to plan my day to come. I love the idea of ticking these things off. I've been in business for myself since 2008. So I've experimented with all the ways. And the best way for me is to do it the day before so that you've got no choices when you wake up in the morning. You know what the number one most important task is. I stick to only 3 tasks, nothing too overwhelming. I allot time next to them in 45-minute blocks. Do what works for you. And then irrespective of how you wake up in the morning, you know what the most important next step is. And you just start taking action. And it's amazing how, you start to choose your mood, you start to do the do because it's right there in front of you.
I love that. So do it the night before, only 3 tasks, and allot time, 45 minutes per each one. That is great because I think sometimes people write things on a to-do list and it gets too long and then it just gets overwhelming. And by keeping it to 3 and being able to tick that off in 45 increments, I remember someone used to tell me, own the morning and you own the day, right? Like that positive momentum and checking a few things off just generates more positive momentum.
100%, completely agree.
One of my favorite questions for guests is, what ask or requests would you like to make of our Unlost Cause community?
I have thought about this and I don't know if it's relevant now. I had a freebie for them, which is month 1 of the Plant Positive Journal. If someone is listening and the action step that I just recommended, if you're not as self-certain as you would love to be and you want to build the habit of planning your day to come the night before, but you've listened to me speaking about living a life aligned with your values, defining your goal with huge emotional intensity, these are the things I speak about in month 1 of the Plant Positive Journal. So if that resonates with you at all, jump on board, download it for free. David's got the link. And I think that's a looking out for you first step that you could take.
And for all the listeners who are like super engaged with this conversation and they want to know how they can support or follow you, what are the websites? What are the socials? Like, give us all of them right now. And then I'll also put them in the show notes.
Perfect. My main website is strongbodygreenplanet.com. From there, you'll find links to the Healthification podcast, 900 plus episodes deep. You'll find links to the Plant Positive Journal. And also you'll find a link to my Plant Positive School community. So school's an amazing community platform. It's just a movement unto itself, but Plant Positive is my safe little space right there. So again, strongbodygreenplanet.com.
And is there any socials or did you?
Strong Body Green Planet, pretty much across Insta, Facebook. It's linked up on the website too.
Great. Wow. From the big city hustle to a grounded life of mission and meaning, Kate Galli has redefined what success looks like on her terms. Her courage to choose alignment over approval and compassion over convenience is an invitation for all of us to do the same. Kate, thank you for living your unlost cause out loud and inspiring so many of us to do the same.
David, this has been so much fun. Thank you for the amazing questions and fabulous intro and outro, and I've had a blast.
Thank you. Before you go, if you're inspired and want to be a part of something bigger, subscribe, like, and share to help more people reclaim their dreams and live true to themselves. Also, let me know if you or someone you know would be an inspiring guest on this show. Together, let's spark courage to live without regrets, the Unlost Cause way, one story and one person at a time.